If you are trying to decide between these action cameras and one of your priorities is connection of a wireless microphone, you're going to want to check out this video because in this regard, one of these cameras simply blows the other two out of the water. Which is it? Well, stick around and let's find out. So pretty much every action camera allows you to connect up an external microphone. And if you have a system like this one, this is the DJI Mic 2 wireless microphone system, you can hook up the receiver to your camera and then wirelessly connect that to one or even two transmitters. But let's face it, this solution is a little bit awkward and cumbersome. It takes time to set it up, and it certainly takes the action element out of your action camera. You're certainly not going to want to mount this to a moving vehicle, the top of your helmet, your surfboard, whatever the case may be, and of course this configuration is definitely not waterproof. And it's also worth mentioning that by the time you purchase the entire system, as well as all the adapters and mounts, it's a pretty expensive solution. But fortunately, all of the newest generation of action cameras also allows you to directly connect a compatible wireless transmitter using just Bluetooth. And clearly that's going to be a much simpler, much more action-friendly, and yes, less expensive solution, but are there performance compromises that you have to deal with? Well, that's what we're going to be taking a closer look at today. Now, for today's video, I have specifically selected to use the DJI Mic 2 transmitter for very good reason that we'll get into later. And it will come as little surprise that the camera it works best with is the new Action 5, which of course is also from DJI. So we're going to do some audio comparisons to see just how much better it is, and we'll also take a look at some of the additional features and capabilities that this solution gives you that the others simply cannot match. So there is a lot to cover, so as usual I'm going to place the chapters up here and on the video timeline, but before we get into it, very important to emphasize this video is not sponsored, paid for, or influenced in any way. I purchased all of the equipment with my own money and the opinions are entirely my own. And of course, if you enjoy the video, please remember to give us a like and consider subscribing to the channel for a lot more similar content. So let's get on with it. So the way that each of these cameras communicates with the DJI Mic 2 transmitter is by using Bluetooth. Except it's not. Well, let me explain. In the case of the Ace Pro and the Hero 13, yes, it's Bluetooth with all the limitations of mediocre audio quality as well as extreme sensitivity to obstructions, but when it comes to the Action 5 Pro, it is way better than just Bluetooth, and I'm really surprised that DJI aren't making more noise about this. Why do I think this? Well, let me take you back a couple of years to the DJI Pocket 2. Now, the Pocket 2 was launched before DJI sold any wireless microphone systems, but one of the accessories for the Pocket 2 was this dedicated wireless microphone. And if you look at the specifications, it shows you that the communication to the camera is by way of a dedicated 2.4 GHz receiver, just like the one you'll find in the DJI Mic 2 receiver. Fast forward a couple of years and DJI came out with the Pocket 3, and here too one of the accessories for the Pocket 3 was this dedicated wireless microphone, which of course turned out to be the transmitter from the DJI Mic 2 system. Now, having done some testing on this configuration, it was very clear to me that the communication here also was way more than just a Bluetooth connection, and I even posted this video last December on that topic. And so that brings us to the Action 5 Pro, and here again, my money is on a dedicated 2.4 GHz receiver being used to power that connection, which is going to give you much better audio quality, significantly better stability and range, and a lot more control and other features that we'll talk about later on as well. So in order to verify this, I guess we need to do some testing. Okay, let's do an audio quality test and a signal stability test on each of these three cameras. As you can see, I am triple mic'd, so I have three DJI Mic 2 transmitters connected wirelessly to each of the three cameras. I have the Action 5, the Hero 13, and the Ace Pro. And what we're going to do is play the exact same audio clip on each camera so you can get an idea of the relative audio quality. So let's start out then at very close distance. Obviously, I am not anticipating any kind of signal issues here. Even if I were to cover the microphones, preventing line of sight, even if I were to turn my back on the camera at this very close distance, I do not anticipate any significant signal loss. So let's start out then at very close distance. Obviously, I am not anticipating any kind of signal issues here. Even if I were to cover the microphones, preventing line of sight, even if I were to turn my back on the camera at this very close distance, I do not anticipate any significant signal loss. So let's start out then at very close distance. Obviously, I am not anticipating any kind of signal issues here. Even if I were to cover the microphones, preventing line of sight, even if I were to turn my back on the camera at this very close distance, I do not anticipate any significant signal loss. Okay, let's now take this a little bit further away. Okay, so now I'm standing around about 25 to 30 feet away from the cameras, and as long as I maintain line of sight, I do not anticipate any significant signal problems. That may change, however, when I turn my back on the camera and block the line of sight between the microphone and the respective camera. So are you hearing me okay? Are you hearing any signal interruption as I do that? Okay, so now I'm standing around about 25 to 30 feet away from the cameras, and as long as I maintain line of sight, I do not anticipate any significant signal problems. That may change, however, when I turn my back on the camera and block the line of sight between the microphone and the respective camera. So are you hearing me okay? Are you hearing any signal interruption as I do that? Okay, so now I'm standing around about 25 to 30 feet away from the cameras, and as long as I maintain line of sight, I do not anticipate any significant signal problems. That may change, however, when I turn my back on the camera and block the line of sight between the microphone and the respective camera. So are you hearing me okay? Are you hearing any signal interruption as I do that? And once again, let's take this a bit further away. So now I'm around about 60 to 70 feet away from the cameras. I assume that you're still able to hear me okay as long as I maintain the line of sight between the transmitters and the cameras. And again, that will change if I turn my back on the camera or create any transmitter and the camera. Typically the Bluetooth will lose that connection. So now I'm around about 60 to 70 feet away from the cameras. I assume that you're still able to hear me okay as long as I maintain the line of sight between the transmitters and the cameras. And again, that will change if I turn my back on the camera or create any kind of obstruction between the transmitter and the camera. Typically the Bluetooth will lose that connection. So now I'm around about 60 to 70 feet away from the cameras. I assume that you're still able to hear me okay as long as I maintain the line of sight between the transmitters and the cameras. And again, that will change if I turn my back on the camera or create any kind of obstruction between the transmitter and the camera. Typically the Bluetooth will lose that connection. And once again, let's head a little bit further away. So now I'm around about 100 feet away from the camera. This is probably pushing the limits for my Bluetooth connection, but I'm thinking that as long as I maintain line of sight, it should be okay. If I just pass my hand across the microphone, that may change slightly. Certainly if I So now I'm around about 100 feet away from the camera. This is probably pushing the limits for my Bluetooth connection, but I'm thinking that as long as I maintain line of sight, it should be okay. If I just pass my hands across the microphone, that may change slightly. Certainly if I turn my back on the microphone or create any kind of obstruction, that will create a signal loss. So now I'm around about 100 feet away from the camera. This is probably pushing the limits for my Bluetooth connection, but I'm thinking that as long as I maintain line of sight, it should be okay. If I just pass my hands across the microphone, that may change slightly. Certainly if I turn my back on the microphone, any kind of obstruction, that will create a signal loss. So a couple of notes on the audio comparison testing. First being that this was really set up as an audio comparison test, not a video comparison test. Please don't draw any conclusions about the relative video quality between the three cameras, because apart from the framing, I really didn't make much effort to try to match the image quality settings. Secondly, just to mention that for the Insta360 and the GoPro, I had to boost the audio level significantly in order to bring those up to about the same level as the DJI. Now, with all that said, I've listened to these clips several times, including using headphones, and for me it's pretty clear that the Insta360 comes in last place. The audio quality was pretty poor generally, and also you could hear that even at relatively short distances, it was extremely sensitive to the slightest obstructions and you would get signal disruptions. Now, frankly, this is not a big surprise to me. As much as I like Insta360 products, and I have owned many of them over the years, one of their weaknesses is definitely anything when it comes to Bluetooth implementation. In second place, I think, was the GoPro. I actually thought the GoPro did pretty well. The audio quality was quite good for a Bluetooth connection, and you could get a reasonable distance away from the camera without suffering too much in the way of signal disruption. But for me, the clear winner was the DJI. Firstly, the audio quality was definitely the best, with a much fuller sound with a better dynamic range, and also, as we saw, you can get much further away from the camera and maintain a stable signal. Now, as we got pretty far away from the camera, we did start to hear some signal disruptions when I turned my back in particular, but I should add that I've done several tests very similar to this one, including using the dedicated receiver, and you get pretty much the same results when using the dedicated receiver. Now, the audio tests that we just heard were all done with the equipment pretty much in out-of-the-box configuration. So there was no special settings or features that were enabled in order to produce those results. And that's where the combination of the Action 5 and the Mic 2 provides additional advantages, because it gives you access to a whole range of settings and features and functions that are just not available with a standard Bluetooth connection. With the Insta360 and the GoPro, the only option you have is to simply connect or disconnect the Bluetooth microphone. There are no other settings available. But in the case of the Action 5, once you've connected the DJI Mic 2 transmitter, go into the settings and you'll find a whole host of different settings and features that will allow you to further optimize your audio. So with the DJI Mic 2 transmitter attached, if we go into the settings, you'll notice under wireless mic, there are a whole bunch of different settings here. Now, the first, of course, you'll notice is that we can add here not just one, but two transmitters to our Action 5. So here I have another one. So let's go ahead and put it into the pairing mode. And as you can see now, I have both transmitters connected. Now, as far as the settings are concerned, you'll notice you can set all kinds of features, including turning on and off the LEDs on the transmitters. You can turn on and off the vibration function. There's what's called dual audio recording. If you enable this, it will also record a backup channel to the camera itself. There is a low cut filter for eliminating some of the lower frequencies. You can also enable or disable the 32-bit float recording on this transmitter. And you can also enable or disable the auto power off function. More on that later on as well. If you go out to the preview screen and you go into settings, and under audio here, you'll notice now I also have access to a whole host of settings specific to each transmitter. I can choose between stereo and mono. When it's set to stereo, I can decide which transmitter goes to the left and which goes to the right channel. I can choose mono, which then will take both signals and place them on a single mono channel. I can set the gain of each transmitter separately. I can mute one or the other remotely. And I can also turn on and off noise reduction on each transmitter. Also, if we take a look at the transmitters themselves, once the transmitter is connected, I can use the power button to turn on and off noise reduction. I can use the standalone recording feature on the transmitter, so I can start a recording here. Even if the camera is recording, I can still elect to start and stop standalone recording on the transmitter. And I can also remotely start and stop recording on the camera by using the pairing button. So by pressing it once, it will start recording on the camera. Pressing it again, of course, will stop the recording. Now, one other thing I want to talk about here is the automatic reconnection of the Bluetooth microphone. And we're going to start out with the Insta360 Ace Pro. So right now I have my DJI Mic 2 transmitter connected. You can see the little AirPods symbol up in the right hand side of the screen here showing that they are connected. Now if I were to power off the microphone, you'll see that it is now disconnected. If I power it back on again, it will reconnect most of the time. There are instances where it fails to reconnect, in which case you have to go into the AirPods menu and go through the process again. Now next up, let's look at what happens if I power off the camera. And then we power the camera back on again. In this instance, the microphone does not automatically reconnect. In order to reconnect it, we have to go back into the menu. And this is very hit and miss. Sometimes it reconnects, sometimes it doesn't. If I start the pairing process on the transmitter itself, that might help. And there you go, now we are reconnected again. Next up, let's look at the GoPro. Now once again, you can see I have my DJI Mic 2 transmitter paired. You can see the little audio level meter at the bottom of the screen which indicates that. So if I once again power off the transmitter, you'll see it disconnects. If I power the transmitter back on again, it will automatically reconnect. Now let's see what happens if we power off the camera and we power it back on again. And here too, just like the Ace Pro, it does not automatically reconnect. In order to reconnect, I have to go back into the menu and again, this is pretty hit and miss. So having powered off and powered on the transmitter again, I'm finally reconnected. And now let's compare that with the Action 5. So in the event that I turn off one or both of my microphones, so I'll turn them both off, you can see, of course, they disconnect. As soon as I power one back on, you can see it reconnects. If I power the other one back on, it also immediately reconnects. Also, if the camera is powered off, you'll notice that the blue lights start flashing on the transmitters because they have now lost any connection. But when I power the camera back on, they instantly reconnect, so they're available for use instantaneously. That's really impressive. And I know I'm going to get this question, so I'll address it now. If you have the quick capture mode enabled and your transmitters are powered on, when you start recording, it powers on, starts recording instantly, and also simultaneously connects both of the transmitters. That is really impressive. Now, important here to note is, if you recall in the settings, there was a feature called auto power off for the transmitters. If that's enabled, these will power off automatically after 15 minutes if there is no active connection. So if you want to be able to use the quick capture together with your DJI microphone, then you will need to obviously disable that auto power off feature. So when you are trying to decide which is the right action camera for you, obviously you are going to be comparing many different features. But if connection of a wireless microphone is one of your top priorities, then this combination is pretty hard to ignore. Now, I have no special inside information, so I cannot tell you for sure what the communication type is, whether it's a dedicated 2.4 gigahertz receiver or something else. But what I can tell you, and hopefully I've been able to show you as well, is that it is way more than just a standard Bluetooth connection and gives you far better performance and far better capabilities. Now, I will be doing some comparison tests between the Action 5, the Hero 13 and the Ace Pro, and of course the Ace Pro 2 when that comes out, so do be on the lookout for those. Meanwhile, if you enjoyed our video today, please remember to give us a like, and please consider subscribing to the channel for a lot more similar content. Also, if you have any questions, any comments, if you have suggestions for future videos, please drop those into the comments section. Otherwise, thanks for watching.